Pussy.
Run!
Justin, what happened?
Let's go! Welcome to the Cage Nation. Welcome to the Cage Nation. Welcome to the Cage Nation. No one can drop us, no one can stop us. We are the warriors, no one can top us, no one can rock us. We are the warriors, no one can drop us, no one can stop us. We are the warriors, no one can top us, no one can rock us. We are the warriors.
That, my friends, is not how you hang drywall.
That guy trains UFC so hard that now they gotta call in someone to rehang that drywall. And that guy trains UFC, bro. Welcome to Cage Nation TV. Of course, I'm your elected official, Albert Cameron. Beside me, as always, is the Prime Minister of Seoul.
Oh, no. Today I'm the merc with the mouth.
Right.
Right there, baby.
Well, you know, I'm actually glad we're geeking out today because, you know, last week we talked about the Green Ranger being in MMA because him and CM Punk we're talking about squaring off.
Right.
I actually have the Green Ranger today in the Cameron Underground.
Nice.
So it's permission to geek out day. So if you're hanging out there getting ready for UFC 170 and you're ready to dork out, we're your guys.
Follow-up story from that last episode, by the way. CM Punk, Vince McMahon has made an official statement on the CM Punk situation saying that CM Punk is on a sabbatical. Did not say any more than that. So, CM Punk is still under contract, so don't be looking for him to jump ship to MMA anytime soon. His contract does expire in July, I believe.
I think it's July.
So, that's right, it is July. So, maybe after the contract expires, if he has no interest in pro wrestling, he's going to delve into the world of MMA, but who knows at this point.
And we'd like to thank TV's Mike Edwards for getting us that information today. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it greatly. Coming up on the Cameron, the Cage Nation TV. It's not just my show; it's our show.
You're sick, man.
I've got a cold. I've been recovering.
That's why we're late. That's okay.
Well, last week there would have been an episode of Cage Nation TV, except for the weather was terrible. Albert Cameron was sick as all get out.
We took a sno day.
We did take a snow day. So
why not? We deserve it.
This episode of Cage Nation TV, we're getting ready for this weekend's UFC 170. We're going to talk about Daniel Cormier and Pat Cummins. What they got going on. It's also the Olympics currently, and we're gonna have a little discussion about should MMA be an Olympic sport. Okay. And then we've also got we're also gonna talk about Christiane Cyborg Justino. She was.
You are sick, aren't you?
She was Cyborg Santos before.
You sure you want to do this today?
I'm positive I want to do it today.
All right.
She was Cyborg Santos before, but now she's Christine Cyborg Justino. We're going to talk about her. Could she possibly be the David to Ronda Rousey's Goliath in women's MMA? We're going to get into that. Of course, we don't just have one fight in the Cameron Underground drill. We've got two. We got two. We got Fedor Emelianenko versus Tsuyoshi Kusaka from the Rings promotion in Japan. And then we've got the Green Ranger himself taking on Carlos Horn, also in the Cameron Underground. So we got a big episode planned. Yeah.
His voice is going to try to hold out for the whole thing.
We're going to try.
I pray to God, because I can't carry you.
We'll write it down if need be. So we're going to go talk to our buddies about the top mount and why you should all buy one right now. And then we're going to come in, we're going to come out, and we're going to talk about Daniel Cormier and Pat Cummins.
All right, you're watching Cage Nation TV. Don't you go nowhere.
Don't worry about remote signal blockage again. Introducing the Top Mount. This low-profile shelf is perfect for placing your cable box where you can use it. The easy-to-install lightweight shelf is designed to fit behind almost any flat screen TV, with or without a wall mount. The Top Mount is perfect for easy access to cable boxes, game consoles, and DVD players. Don't have your signal blocked again. Order your Top Mount today at thetopmount.com.
Welcome back to Cage Nation TV. Albert Cameron, Drew Shannon. And we are working our way to UFC 170, and there's a lot of great fights on this card. Two in particular that I believe we're going to talk about.
Well, there's, yeah, you said it. I think you said it best. There are a lot of great fights on the UFC 170 card. The Cage Nation TV, I think, with the program we've always done, has been programming that's pertinent to our region.
Right.
So the first fight we're going to talk about is Daniel Cormier versus Pat Cummins. And you think it's such a high-profile fight like Cormier versus Cummins, how does that possibly have any sort of ties to anything that may have happened here originally.
Well, Pat Cummins trained here in State College, correct?
I don't know if he trained here in State College. I think he trains out of Harrisburg.
Okay.
But he was a State College resident for 4 years while he earned his bachelor's degree from Penn State University, which is, 15 minutes up the road from where we're standing right now?
Not even that.
Not even that.
Well, yeah, 15 minutes. Whatever.
Pat Cummins has State College history here. And, you think of all the great wrestlers that have come from State College that have transitioned into MMA. Of course, I'm thinking now Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis. Mm-hmm. And then more locally, Tyler the Daywalker Saltzman.
Right.
So there's getting to be a nice little pedigree and a nice correlation between being a Penn State wrestler and getting into MMA and doing those sort of things.
I say, if I'm not mistaken, Cormier, I think, does have some ties with Central PA Mixed Martial Arts. But
Cormier?
I would have to double check on that. Or not Cormier, Cummins. Excuse me, Cummins has some connections with Central PA Mixed Martial Arts. I'll have to double check on that. Entirely
possible. I mean, Ryan Gruen has got his fingers in deep with the local Pennsylvania combat sports scene.
Right.
So when I heard this fight, and if you know me about anything, Drew, I am notorious for being able to pull random facts right out of my tuchus.
Yeah.
About people. So whenever the fight between Cummins and Cormier was announced, you all heard, MMA, Strikeforce MMA.
Right.
What I heard was two heavyweights who used to wrestle in Real Pro Wrestling. And I don't know if you remember the Real Pro Wrestling organization at all.
No.
Okay.
And I'm the wrestling guy.
You're the wrestling guy. On the Ion, it was either Ion or PAX, like one of those like smaller networks.
It was PAX.
It was PAX. There was a big push to try to promote amateur wrestling as a big ordeal. Mm. It was Real Pro Wrestling, and Rulon Gardner, an Olympic heavyweight wrestler himself, who actually won the gold medal in the 2002 Olympics.
I believe so.
Okay, so
we'll check.
Right there's your answer, friends. So Rulon Gardner is getting involved in promoting Real Pro Wrestling as, hey, we're giving these guys a chance who are coming out of collegiate wrestling, and they've got nothing else they can do. Well, we're going to give them a platform to be involved in. Pat Cummins wrestled for the Pennsylvania Hammer. So and me being the guy who's trying to support combat sports in all of its facets,
sure.
When I heard about that Pennsylvania had a team, I was like, oh man, I'm all about the Pennsylvania Hammer. And of course, Pat Cummins. So PAX TV does a special on the Pennsylvania Hammer, and Pat Cummins is actually in downtown State College on College Avenue talking about his favorite places to be. Like, I think he was even at the diner getting a grilled sticky. And just a bunch of fantastic stuff like that, really, really highlighting where we're from. Mm. And I know we're both very, very proud about being from State College.
Sure.
So, also competing in Real Pro Wrestling is Daniel D.C. Cormier, who has Olympic pedigree himself. Mm. But not just Daniel Cormier and Pat Cummins, but also King Mo Lawal. All these guys are involved in the Real Pro Wrestling organization. Okay. And so, me being the historian I am and just pulling facts out of my backside, that's the kind of stuff I heard. And that's what got me excited about this fight. Was that sort of obscure pedigree that they both share.
All right, great. What's your fight prediction?
I don't have one.
You don't have one at all?
I don't have one. I think it's going to be Cormier just because he does have more MMA pedigree than what Cummins does.
Okay.
But I'll tell you how I see this fight going. When you get two purist wrestlers like that, so we've got Cummins and Cormier who are both purist wrestlers, they're going to end up fighting. They're going to have a game plan. I'm sure the game plan is try to stand up as long as possible, use your striking, keep him at a distance, avoid his takedown. And I'm sure both camps are telling them that. What's going to happen is they're going to get a couple punches traded off. It's going to be halfway through the first round, and then they're going to go to their baser instincts. For both guys, those baser instincts is amateur wrestling. Okay. So I think it's either going to turn into a very, very good amateur wrestling match in the middle of the cage, or it's going to be a stall fest, which they're going to get each other up against the cage. They're going to try to pin each other on their backs. And in MMA, being pinned on your back doesn't mean anything,
right?
Except for not having a whole lot of places to go. I think what's really, really interesting about Cummins versus Cormier is Cummins came out and said that he broke Daniel Cormier down in the wrestling room when he was training for a big high-profile fight or a high-profile wrestling match. Cormier has come out and said, no, he didn't. And now he's saying that he's going to make Pat Cummins pay for that. So I think we got makings of very, very good athletes. MMA fighters are very, very good athletes, but now we've got Olympic caliber athletes in the middle of a light heavyweight bout, and I think it's going to be fantastic.
All right. Also on this card, obviously, everybody's looking forward to Ronda Rousey versus Sarah McMahon.
Right.
Jessica Ai is going to be fighting, and just so many other great fights.
UFC 170.
It's going to be really. It's going to be an excellent night.
UFC 170 is really, really highlighting a lot of great wrestlers. Of course, we've already talked about Cormier and Cummins. Sarah McMahon is also an Olympic wrestler.
Right.
She's a silver medalist in the women's division. And of all the people that Ronda Rousey's fought, Ronda Rousey's fought a lot of great mixed martial artists. I can't say that any of them have the wrestling pedigree that Sarah McMahon does. Okay. And Miesha Tate proved that Ronda Rousey is not Kryptonian, that she is human and can be taken, the distance. I think Sarah McMahon's going to elaborate on that. I'm sure she was watching that last fight between Tate and Rousey very, very closely. I'm sure she's going to come in with a real sharp game plan.
All right, that's Saturday night, pay-per-view. Call your local cable provider, satellite provider, or stop on out if one of the local watering holes has it on, and it's like a $5 cover, plunk down the $5.
Does Bonfados and Belfont still do?
I don't know if Bonfados does. I know Champs still does.
Champs still does?
I don't know about Bonfados, though.
Because I like Bonfados.
I like Bonfados, too. I also like Champs.
I do like Champs.
Champs is closer.
The Rampage Jackson Burger is.
I'm a fan of the Wabbit season. Thank you very much. It's a nice duck sandwich.
All right, I digress.
All right. All right, let's get into topic number 2.
Okay.
Should MMA be an Olympic sport?
Let me ask you a question, just because I've had all day to pore over this.
Right.
I know exactly what I think. How do you think? Now, you being a very good commentator, a very, very good ring announcer, and having a lot of exposure in MMA over the last couple of years, essentially since we met, I think since I've met you, I've been trying to pour mixed martial arts down your throat. Do you think that MMA would be a good Olympic sport?
I think it has a spot in the Olympics.
Okay.
Boxing,
yes,
jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling since day one.
Like the first Olympic sport was wrestling.
There has always been some form of, would you say combat sports?
Oh, certainly they're combat sports.
Some form of combat sports in the Olympics. So MMA, I feel, if the IOC were to bring in MMA, would just be the next step, the next evolution in competitive sports, combat fighting within the Olympics.
Okay. Here's the part that's going to alarm you. I don't agree with you.
What?
I don't. I don't think that MMA has a place in the Olympics whatsoever.
You?
Yeah. Mr. Let's get MMA legalized across all 50 states.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a place in the Olympics.
All right, please explain.
Okay. Especially doing ring announcing, you know that there are a particular set of rules that we've understand in North America to be the unified rules. That they are with a couple degrees of separation, that the rules in Pennsylvania are typically the same rules in Nevada, typically the same rules in New Jersey. Right. Okay, we agree with that. Those rules are different than what happens over in Asia. Over in Asia, at some point, they would allow soccer kicks. Okay. So whenever Ted Worthington was fighting Brett Schoenfeld at the main event of Complete Devastation MMA 9, I think there was one point, and I could be wrong, there was one point where Brett Schoenfeld had a vertical base, Ted Worthington was on his back. At that point, any strikes to Ted Worthington's head were illegal, based on unified rules in North America. Okay. 2005 in Japan, there was a very loud noise back there. That's what the alarm was. 2005, those rules, Brett Schoenfeld could have launched a kick into Ted Worthington's head and it would have been completely fine. Right. In Japan. There are different rules in Russia. There are different rules in India with like the Super Fight League. Mexico might even have their own set of rules. So what's going to end up happening is the IOC is going to have to come together and say, okay, now we need to agree on a global set of rules. Heaven only knows, because Japan's going to say, well, we've got Olympic athletes, but they need to compete under these rules. North America and Canada's going to say, oh, no, we need to compete under these rules. So what I see happening is the amalgamation of rules is just going to make MMA, Olympic MMA, completely different than what we're used to here in North America. Okay. So what the IOC would have to do is sit down. They would have to come up with one set of unified rules. You see that as the problem, just because... I think it's going to be a vast problem.
Just because of the various rules across the country. Right. Or across the globe. Across the globe, excuse me. Across the globe. Okay. I could see that point. Okay. The people who compete in the Olympics, especially in combat sports, are required to wear a lot of protective clothing. Okay. In boxing, they have to wear head guards, thicker gloves. Taekwondo, you have to wear the chest protector. Right.
very other protective devices need to be in place. In Pennsylvania, amateur fighters have to wear the kick pads, they have to wear thicker gloves. In Ohio, they don't have to wear those. So now there is just a whole other degree of disconnect. What I could see happening is Olympic MMA requiring fighters to wear kick pads, to wear thicker gloves, and to have to wear headgear. And I think a lot of people have said from the beginning that making amateur MMA fighters wear headgear would just be a completely different problem. Especially when the fight goes to the ground, and you need all your wits about you, that headgear would become restrictive. The thicker gloves, the different padding makes mobility an issue.
Right. So an individual might get gassed before with this extra padding, pretty much extra baggage, as opposed to what we have now.
I think over the different fights we've called, I've explained to what the rubber guard was. So where you're trying to pull up high with in attempt at a triangle or an arm bar. With that sort of padding on, how easy would it be to pull off a rubber guard? So right now you're taking away natural body mechanics.
Okay.
And I think that's just also kind of problematic. So we've talked about the rules, potential protective devices.
Okay.
I mean, there's just...
Well, you keep talking about amateurs. Obviously, the pros wouldn't be allowed to fight.
I mean, I don't think pro athletes can compete in the Olympics that I'm aware of. I think the exception being basketball. I know the Dream Team, the Olympic.
I was going to say, if I recall correctly, the Dream Team.
Right, but I mean, like, okay, well, pro fighters are under contracts with different advertisers.
Okay.
And sponsors. They can't carry those sponsorships into their individual fights if it were Olympic.
Right.
Sponsors can sponsor teams, but I don't think they can sponsor individuals. So now those fighters are training, they're losing income because they're not able to carry those kind of sponsorships in.
Okay.
So we get amateur fighters who are competing under rules that don't make sense to anybody because they're so amalgamated, and they're having to wear protective devices that are really just kind of restrictive. I think by the time we can take all that in, I don't think that Olympic MMA, if it were to exist the way I'm seeing it, would make sense to anyone else. It wouldn't make sense to Asian MMA the way they compete.
Okay.
It wouldn't make sense to North American MMA. And then we got to ask, do they compete in a ring or a cage?
Well, that's another good question.
Exactly. I mean, it comes down to, Olympic boxers, they compete in a ring. Olympic judo and taekwondo, they compete on mats. Would it be a cage? I mean, I think different different Asian promotions would say, hey, our athletes are used to competing in rings.
Right.
We demand it to be in a ring. Well, over in North America, we do everything primarily in cages. So again, that's just another degree of separation to where we're trying to appease a global audience.
Sure.
And it just doesn't work.
All right.
So now, while I disagree that MMA should be an Olympic sport, and this is all coming about because Randy Couture says a handful of countries have already signed on to try to fight for MMA to be an Olympic sport. And as much as I respect everything Mr. Couture has done, I disagree with him wholeheartedly. What I think should happen is, I think that pancration should be an Olympic sport. Pancration is one of those forefathers of MMA. It was also one of the early Olympic sports. Okay. It's a combination of wrestling, open-handed strikes, and submission holds. Just like Pancrase was whenever Ken Shamrock and Frank Shamrock competed. Okay. That's really kind of similar to what it was. So now we take away the difficulty of, do we compete in a ring or a cage? But you can do it on a mat. Once we get into grappling arts, well then, the gear that we need to be required to be a little different. And we wouldn't need to wear headgear because we're not using close-handed strikes. That's my solution to the whole issue. So while I disagree that MMA should be an Olympic sport, I think pancration should be brought back in. And I think it would all make sense to us because it's got the grappling that jiu-jitsu guys are all about. It has a degree of striking, but I think it's a little more closer to what we could all agree on.
All right. You all right?
No, that was just a marathon. That was just a marathon talking there, and I'm glad I pulled it off.
Holy crap. Point, counterpoint. All right, we're going to take a bit of a break, let you catch your breath.
Thank you.
And we're going to come back here in just a few. We're going to take a time out and give our friends over at the Pro Wrestling Rundown a little bit of airtime to promote their program. And we'll be back to continue our discussion. Next topic up, Christiane Cyborg Justino. How big of a threat is she to rowdy Ronda Rousey? You're watching... what are we watching?
You're watching
Cage Nation TV. We'll be back.
Hello, MMA fans. Look, people. MMA fans. And we're wrestling guys on an MMA show. Holy moly. What's this world coming to? We want to take this time and thank Drew Shannon and Albert Cameron.
We do?
Yeah.
All right,
For allowing us a little bit of their time here on Cage Nation Television to promote the Pro Wrestling Rundown. Do I have to do all the talking here?
Come on, guys. Show us a little bit of love. We're showing you some love. We know that they're a crossover fan, so catch us on our YouTube channel. What is it again, X?
YouTube.com/Pro Wrestling Rundown.
Hope to see you there.
Welcome back to Cage Nation TV. Drew Shannon. Drew Shannon, Albert Cameron.
I'm Albert Cameron.
I'm starting to get sick now.
You're not getting sick. It's sympathy sick. This is me. This is me kind of struggling to talk because we have that naturally golden voice that a very, very wise man in the Center County radio profession helped me develop.
No, you're standing too close to me. You're breathing on me. Now I'm getting sick. Is what's going on.
You can't get sick that fast.
I can't. All right, so we're going to talk about Christiane Cyborg Justino and how big of a threat she could possibly be to Rowdy Ronda Rousey.
Well, of course, Rowdy Ronda Rousey's defending her women's bantamweight championship against Sarah McMahon this weekend.
Right.
And we talk about how big of a threat Sarah McMahon is. Well, I think the elephant in the room has always been Cyborg. A lot of people don't like her. A lot of threats, accusations have gone out this week. Mm-hmm. And if we're able to make it happen, I don't think everyone realizes how big of a super fight I think it would really, really be. Okay. Coming out of the Cyborg camp, Tito Ortiz stepped down as her manager. So, Tito Ortiz realized that, hey, he can't get his own life in order.
How's he going to get hers?
How's he going to get her career up and running? So the way that it happened that Tito Ortiz got involved is after the UFC folded Strikeforce into their ranks, they had Cyborg Santos at the time. Now she's Justino. They had Cyborg and they realized they couldn't do anything with her. Cyborg cuts really, really hard to make it to 145. And they've always talked about her fighting Ronda Rousey, who fights at 135. Well, it got to the point where it ended up becoming a UFC women's division pissing contest. Rousey's like, I'm not going to 45. And Cyborg saying, well, I can't make it to 35. Because, a lot goes into a weight cut.
Sure.
That Cyborg said was really unhealthy. And I'm not someone to say, you could make the weight. Because cutting weight is an extremely difficult and taxing situation. And you'd never want to push someone to say, you can cut that extra 10 pounds. Because that extra 10 pounds could really be fatal.
Right.
So, it's kind of been this thing, this, that, and the other, Tito stepping down. So, Cyborg never signed a UFC contract because there's no one for her to fight. UFC is cultivating a bantamweight division. They weren't looking to get a featherweight.
Now she's looking to get into Invicta, or she is in.
She is in Invicta. Okay. I think she's the Invicta title holder right now.
Okay.
Featherweight, and just because there's competition there, UFC was going to sign her, and they were going to broker a deal between Cyborg and Invicta, saying, "Hey, you're a UFC fighter fighting for Invicta." Cyborg's like, "Well, why don't I just go to Invicta myself?" And that's where Tito got involved. Okay. And whenever Tito Ortiz gets involved in a situation, it's never pretty.
Now, what about the discussion of PEDs here?
A lot of people have always said that Cyborg's been involved in steroids and performing-enhancing drugs. Okay. And, there's a reason why we have drug tests in MMA to try to weed that kind of behavior out. I mean, I'm sure cycling exists, and it's easy to get in and out of getting those drugs out of your system. But I've never seen... Cyborg's never given me any reason to believe she's in performing-enhancing drugs. She's a very athletic woman. She's a very sturdy woman. But nothing about her, to me, says she's doping or she's juicing. Right. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on the field, but you see people who get involved in steroids. I hate to throw pro wrestling under the bus, but when guys who are involved in late 90s, early 90s, late 80s,
that whole George Horian scandal. Yeah. Out of the doctor out of Hershey.
Yeah. Yeah. These guys are huge. Well, then they step away from the WWF for a while, and they end up shrinking a lot.
Well, look at Hogan. Hogan was larger than life. He goes into this trial against Vince McMahon. Next thing you know, in about, 93? Mm-hmm. He shows up in 93, 94, he shows up in WCW. He's obviously looking a little thinner, a little more gaunt.
He's definitely a lot leaner.
And definitely a lot leaner. I mean, to be perfectly honest, he didn't look like the same Hulk Hogan I grew up with. No. And he looked sickly.
Have you seen Lex Luger these days?
Luger looks even worse.
Right. So,
you can go as far as Superstar Billy Graham.
Yeah.
His he's just deteriorated. I mean, that guy, and it's all due to steroid abuse.
I'd say probably the best case scenario to compare a Cyborg Justino would be Joni Lauer, China. So China was certainly into bodybuilding a lot.
Well, China's into some other drugs now, I think, so would probably keep her out of competition. But
okay,
but if she was, yeah, okay,
if she was really into bodybuilding,
yeah,
and she really muscular, really defined. I'm not going to come out and say steroids, but she certainly paid a lot of attention to her physique. Mm-hmm. I see China and I could say steroids. I don't initially look at Cyborg and I don't think that. Right. I think she's an actually sturdy woman who works very, very hard on her athletic abilities. Mm-hmm. But I think if she were to get hurt and step away from MMA for a while, I don't think we'd see that slimming down that we see with people who have come out and said they're involved in steroids. Okay. So, that's just my diatribe on people throwing Cyborg under the bus.
Now, it says here that Ronda Rousey thinks that Cyborg is just trying to sign a super fight, lose, and then retire on the fight purse.
I mean, she could.
I mean, do you think that is plausible?
No.
Or do you think it's just Ronda Rousey talking out her ass?
Anything's plausible. Anything's plausible. I mean, I don't know. I like to think that the people who are involved in the Shootbox Academy out of Brazil conduct themselves as warriors a little bit more than to do something like that.
Right.
And we all know Ronda Rousey to be the kind of person to make statements for the sake of generating buzz. Not saying she's making stuff up or being, ill factual. Right. But she does kind of have a knack to say or making grandiose statements in the sake of getting people interested in the fight. I think it would be a super fight, though. I mean, I know for a fact I would pay money, like the whole $60 to see that fight, just because I think Cyborg has proven so much in women's MMA. Ronda Rousey's clearly the darling of women's MMA, and I think it'd just be a fantastic main event. I think the payday would be high, though, even if Cyborg were to lose. So, I mean, anything's possible with that one.
All right, let me go off script here for a moment.
Shoot.
Recently this week, it was announced, and we're going to go, follow me on this. We're going to go into wrestling, and we're going to work our way back to MMA. It was announced this week that Dish Network was no longer going to carry WWE pay-per-views because of the WWE Network. Because of the fact that you can get the WWE Network for $9.99, and with that you get all this special programming, plus you get the pay-per-views each month as a part of your subscription.
Right.
Dish Network was like, hey, that's unfair because your fan base is going to gravitate towards that as opposed to paying the $45, $55 for the pay-per-views that you air through us. You're not going to lower that dollar amount, but you're going to and they just felt it was unfair, and they completely dropped the pay-per-views.
Okay.
Now my question is, how soon before Dana White decides that he wants to go in the same route with the UFC Fight Pass? Now I know UFC Fight Pass, the whole UFC television, they've had some difficulty with of course, with their streaming and whatnot. There's been a lot of technical problems from what I've been told. Mm-hmm. Given time that, if they can work on it, do you foresee Dana White going down the same route?
I think...
And I guess the other question tied into that is, what would the future of pay-per-view fights be at that point?
I think technology is evolving every single day. That's going to make his histories and traditions obsolete at some point. Think about a home video collection. I mean,
right.
How many people didn't sink hundreds of thousands of dollars into UFC home videos that had to buy them all over again on DVD, that now have to buy them all over again on Blu-ray? Mm-hmm. Technology's going to...
You can play DVDs on Blu-ray, though.
But you're not going to get them in the same high def kind of quality. What I'm saying is technology is going to change. So,
right.
I mean, it certainly makes it easier for me. If the UFC Fight Pass were to include their pay-per-views, and now I can get all that stuff for $10 a month, I mean, that just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's economical. And the reason why the WWE and ultimately the UFC would be able to offer those prices so low is the overhead. So they're not having to pay out Time Warner, not to have to pay out Dish Network so much to get that product to you, they've developed a way to make it economical for them to, instead of going from WWE cable company to you, now they can go from WWE to you, and that sort of advances in technology is what making it easier to get that stuff out there.
Okay.
Do you remember when pay-per-views you had to actually go to your cable company and get the box?
No, I remember we had to have the box to get all of the extra channels, all your cable channels. Yeah. Otherwise, it was 1 through 12, and the cable went directly in your TV.
Right.
You had to get the box, and then you got like Superstation TBS. You got USA Network. You had just countless amounts of, I think it was like 30, 40 extra channels, and we loved it. But then you would call your cable provider, much like you do today, and you say, hey, I would like to subscribe to, you don't even really need to call your cable provider anymore.
That's the
you
point.
just click a button.
That's the point I'm getting to.
Yeah, you would call the cable provider, they would hook you up. If anything went wrong, normally they could send a guy out that night to fix it, and they'd offer you a freebie or whatever, and that's how it was. Nowadays,
in 1993, my Uncle Tim got Tyson versus McNeely on pay-per-view. That was $60 in $1993, which is practically $80 in today's currency.
I would go even
further
further
it might
than
even
that.
It might even be 100.
Yeah, that's what 21 years ago.
Oh, my childhood.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
My uncle
Tim actually had to go to the cable company, get that pay-per-view box, bring it back and install it. 21 years later, I'm able to get into my cable that I pay for with my remote, and I'm able to order it. So the technology has advanced so much that I don't have to worry about that middleman anymore.
Or if you want to go kind of a sneaky route, you just go online and stream it illegally, which we don't condone.
No,
we do not condone at all.
Okay, but I mean, the illegal streaming. That's the same thing as fuzzy.
And I think
fuzzy pay-per-view stuff that.
Playboy, we get it. I think a lot of that has been has kind of been what's the word I'm looking for? Shot down. A lot of the illegal streaming has been shut down. I know that a friend of mine tried to get a pay-per-view at one point and tried to stream it and was unable to. Was shut out on numerous occasions just because the FBI had caught up to these people and just shutting their sites down. There might still be some out there. Again, I'm not condoning it, but
everything being relative.
Right.
As much as we were able to pirate cables back in the 90s, now they're now able to pirate, those sort of feeds. Mm. So getting back to your question, could cable providers drop UFC from pay-per-view? Well, if you look back at the UFC's history, I imagine the UFC would walk away with a big middle finger, considering that there was a time where porn was on pay-per-view, but the UFC wasn't.
Right.
So in the history of things, would that be the worst thing to happen to UFC? Probably not.
No.
With the UFC Fight Pass, we're all going to get out there. We're all going to get the UFC pay-per-views, whether it's through going to Champs, getting it at home. We're going to watch UFC, and if they're able to get it to us cheaper, I think the UFC would end up making more money because, John and Joe average here are now able to get more access to UFC pay-per-views in our home, and we're getting a ton more bonus content with that.
Okay, would WWE or UFC, if they were to suddenly... Okay, let's leave WWE out of the equation because they're already doing what they're doing. Let's say UFC does the same thing and follows suit. Would they be in violation of any sort of a contract that they have with the cable providers, with Dish Network, with DirecTV?
I can't say providers. I think it would hurt their opportunities with their networks that they have contracts with. Okay. UFC just entered into a huge contract with Fox. That's why we're seeing UFC on Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2, FX, whatever other... Fox 8.
Right.
UFC's on Fox 8. I think if UFC were trying to kind of bring all their stuff in-house, I think that might kind of strain that relationship with Fox.
And incidentally, Fox 8 is our local Fox channel here in State College.
Fox 53 in Pittsburgh.
Okay, there you go.
Fox 53 in Pittsburgh. So, the UFC's on all those channels. Mm-hmm. I think it might hurt that relationship. But as far as pay-per-view goes, I think pay-per-view needs the UFC more than UFC needs pay-per-view.
So, that being said, do you think pay-per-view could be... let's give it about, I don't know, let's give it 2 years.
I'd say in 5
You
years.
think?
I'd say in 5 years, the pay-per-view system we know to see fights is going to be completely different. Because I mean, I think we're all going to, with the advances in Xbox and PlayStation technology, even like the Roku, where you can get all that cables, all that TV content directly to you. I think in 5 years.
Well, even on your smartphones now.
Oh yeah.
Your smartphones, your iPads, your Kindles, hell, your laptop, your computer.
The pay-per-view system was never designed to be eternal. You know, back in the day, being able to call
the pay-per-view providers would probably doubt you on that one. But.
Well, but you know, they had to have seen it coming because at one point, you know, pay-per-view was the answer to having to get in your car and drive to Madison Square Garden to see Bruno Sammartino wrestle or whatever the case may be.
Even take it this far. Pay-per-view at one point was, I remember way back when, Rocky IV was going to be on pay-per-view. That was the big event in my neighborhood, and everybody was getting ready. They were going to order Rocky IV on pay-per-view. Now, all you got to do is pay $7.99. Netflix will stream it into your home, and you're all set. You can watch whatever you want, whenever you want.
Exactly.
Even the on-demand libraries on your cable network.
Pay-per-view was the infant technology of bringing convenience to the home, and now I think, you know, as much as we appreciate everything pay-per-view's done, I think it's on its way out.
All right.
But for us,
I just had to get that out there because it was a breaking story this week, and I'm trying to look to the MMA aspect of the whole thing.
I think we're all going to be affected because it's whether it be professional wrestling, boxing, MMA, you know, wrestling, whatever the case may be, it all affects us because it's part of the entertainment value. So I mean, it's all going to affect us. I kind of look forward to the day whenever I can pay a monthly subscription, and I know like a couple episodes ago I was kind of like, I'm not going to get the Fight Pass, but the more and more I'm looking into it, the more and more I think I'm going to do it. You know, it's just all that content there it's so worth it. I
was actually talking to somebody today. He's a writer for an MMA blog, and he said that there's just there's so much difficulty with that Fight Pass right now. They've got quite a bit of work to do on that. So hopefully we can get the kinks worked out, and who knows, maybe eventually down the road, if things do work for WWE, for their network, maybe Uncle Dana takes a second look at Fight Pass and says, hey, it's profitable, we could do this, we could cut out the middleman, or we could just give you the product without you having to go through a Time Warner, a Comcast, Dish Network, DirecTV. We'll just give it directly to you. So
that kind of circles back to the conversation we had last week. How close are the WWE and UFC related as far as, like, you know, could an athlete go from one to the other easily? It's all about combat sports,
right?
And, you know, the entertainment value,
whether one's scripted or not.
We could go out into the back streets of Altoona and see someone fighting in a parking lot. But I mean, we gravitate towards professional wrestling and mixed martial arts because of the pageantry. Right. You know, that's what makes it an event to watch, a spectacle, really. And I think that's what. So yes, all that.
So changes could be coming. You never know.
Exactly.
All right. Now that we're done with all that, let's get into the Cameron Underground, and we have not one but two fights. Fightos. I don't. Whatever. Why don't you introduce these?
All right. Well, the first fight in the Cameron Underground is historical for me, anyway. Mm-hmm. There's two sides of the who's the greatest of all time coin. One side of the coin says Anderson Silva. The other side of the coin says Fedor Emelianenko. I've openly been on the Fedor Emelianenko camp. So we think about the history of MMA. You know, all these super fights that could have been if guys were able to come from Japan and fight guys from the United States. This is one of those fights that could have been. It's Fedor Emelianenko versus Tsuyoshi Kosaka. And we're going to go to that fight right now.
Let's do it.
高坂の登場です。相手はヒョードル、強豪であります。高坂ガード上げた方がいいですね。そうですか。おお、右のストレート打っていった。これは切れた。切れました？どっちが？ヒョードル。ヒョードル。ヒョードルが切れました。タイム。あっと止めましたね。今バッティングあったんですね。じゃあ打ってた時に。タイムストップ。頭とパンチがありました。おっとこれはなんか嫌な予感ですね。
今日結構パンチでカット多いですね。
目の上か。
位置からするとパッティングっぽいですけどね。
高坂の右のストレートはね、空を切ったと思うんです。その勢いで多分、でもかすったら かすったら切れやすいですね。
あるいはその勢いで頭が
これはストップ
当たったか。
ストップですね。
And now that fight is over. Drew didn't have as long as what he
Fight was over?
Fight was over.
Oh my God.
Yeah, watching that fight, Kosaka opened up Fedor in the initial punch. He got him on the cut in the eyebrow. The rules of the King of King tournaments was, the fight there had to be a clear winner. So with that cut being where it was, they couldn't call the fight a draw because Kosaka had opened up the cut. He was declared the victor. That was Fedor's only loss for the longest time. Now the tragedy part of it was, if Fedor had won that fight, he would have actually gone on to fight Randy Couture in the next round. Could have been a legendary epic fight that just never was.
So what did you say about Fedor Emelianenko? That you're openly...
I'm openly one of his... I think he was part of the greatest of all time.
So you're openly Fey? So what you're getting at?
Not that there's anything wrong with
Not
that.
that there's anything wrong with that. All right, let's go to fight number 2.
This is the fight we probably should have aired last week.
Okay.
I will admit my faults as a producer, director, whatever the case may be. This is the fight we should have aired last week.
Jason David Fearless Frank taking on Carlos Horn.
Yeah, the Green Ranger getting into MMA against Carlos Horn for the UWC. Fight's a little bit longer, I promise.
All right, let's go
to it.
This one is scheduled for 3 5-minute rounds. Horn in the black and white trunks. Frank in the black full tilt trunks. Ooh, big takedown right off the bat for Horn.
And I can tell you for sure this is not where Jason David Frank wants to be. He was practicing the cage walk, which you can see he's scooting his hips back, trying to get back to his feet. This is not where he wants to be. It's not really where his skills are, and he gets flipped. Armbar coming up, of course, and he's going to tap. That's it.
21 seconds! Jason David Frank taps out Carlos Horn! Looks like he hurt himself doing it, but he...
And Frank wins by armbar.
Go, MMA fighter. I'm sorry.
It's okay. What?
That was my cape.
You had a cape?
I had a cape on. It was fun. But I kind of ruined the moment with my darkness. Anyway, Jason David Frank. Now, you saw from that video, Drew, he's not the skinny Tommy Oliver that we knew from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
No.
He's bulked up. He's got tattoos. And he kind of looked kind of green there whenever the fight hit the ground.
Did you think about that before you said it?
Completely off the cuff.
Oh my God.
Completely off the cuff.
Okay.
So he looked a little inexperienced whenever the fight hit the ground. But again, he has that traditional...
I can't believe you said that. That's awesome.
He relied on that traditional experience. He's able to turn around into a really good armbar. A Green Ranger is fighting MMA. How much fun is that?
Well, let's see if somebody else decides to fight MMA and get those two in a cage and...
Okay, let's think about history, because we're older guys.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, I
23.
23, how many times? Anyway, remember back in the 90s when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came out?
You know what? I never watched the show.
But you were aware that there was a TV show called the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Samuel L. Jackson.
That was also the same time that Pulp Fiction reference.
Yeah.
At the same time that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was coming out, UFC was coming out as like the bare knuckle, like, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves kind of thing.
Right, it was like Thunderdome.
Right. Could you imagine back in the day that a Tommy from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was going to fight in the UFC kind of fight back in the 90s? We'd have never believed it.
Green Ranger would be like, I trained UFC, bro.
UFC trained UFC, bro.
You'd be like, really? You can't fight without the other the other 4 with you?
Right. Like, you can't win a fight without the Dragon Sword. What's wrong with you?
Come on. Dude.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, if we were to go back in time and say, hey, Albert and Drew of the 1990s, Tommy the Green Ranger is going to fight in UFC-style competition, they'd never believe us. Oh, how things have changed in 20 years.
Yep. All right, I got to get back to the home, so we should wrap this up.
We probably should. Well, of course, ladies and gentlemen, all of our good news comes out on Facebook. I know we do a very, very good job of putting out local news, regional news, and of course,
we try the best we can.
Absolutely. So
we're working men, so
So for all the late breaking stuff, you certainly want to like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Cass does a great job of getting out information on Twitter.
Definitely. He also keeps up the Facebook every now and again. So.
I think we all do a very good tandem job of doing Facebook.
And keep in mind that, coming up, is it going to be 3 weeks from this Saturday?
Yeah.
Gladiators of the Cage. It's going to kick off our double shot of MMA in the Pittsburgh area. March 15th, we'll be live at Gladiators of the Cage and at Stage AE, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll be at Pinnacle FC.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most important things that we can say, because we've been talking about how proud we are of being from State College so much, on behalf of everyone from the Cage Nation, I'm talking to you guys who are dancing at Thon this weekend. Good luck. Keep up the great work. You guys are doing fantastic work for a very, very great cause, and you have all of our support with you.
And, of course, I'll be there all weekend long providing live coverage. So if you get a chance, tune in to 105.9 Quick Rock, streaming online at 105.9QWIKRock.com, and we'll have the final total as it comes in a little bit after 4 o'clock on Sunday. FTK for the kids.
Thon is the largest student-run philanthropy on the planet, and we're very proud to say that we're from State College. So,
and since 1977, has benefited the Four Diamonds Fund at Hershey's Medical Center for pediatric cancer research.
True story. We're actually heading to Pittsburgh on the same route that we take to get to Gladiators and Pinnacle. I actually saw someone canning, like, maybe 3 miles outside of Pittsburgh.
And for those of you who don't understand canning, that's when the students will go out and they'll have the cans, and people will contribute, coins, spare change, dollars, whatever. So,
right.
Do your part. Thon.org. Make a donation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Albert Cameron, your elected official. Beside me, as always, the Prime Minister of Seoul, Drew Shannon. We'll see you.
The Merc with the mouth this week.
The Merc with the mouth, Drew Shannon. Next week, we'll see you guys live on Cage Nation. Not live, but we'll see you on Cage Nation TV.
Later.
Let's go. Ah.